Welcome to Morbid Mystique, where the shadows whisper and the unknown beckons. Tonight, we plunge into a chilling tale that will grip your soul and haunt your dreams. Prepare yourself for The Halfway Man, a story of terror that lingers long after the lights go out. Dim the lights, lock the doors, and let's step into the darkness together. Subscribe and hit the bell to never miss a shiver-inducing story.
I met a man with only half a face, and ever since, he's been stalking me. I know he's going to kill me eventually, but don't get me wrong. I am not going to sit here and let it happen. Even though I've sealed myself into a fate I cannot escape, I'm going to continue to struggle for my own survival until the end. I figured I should share my story here before the inevitable happens, so that none of you make the same mistakes I did when I first encountered the Halfway Man. It was a windy night the first time I encountered the thing that still haunts my every waking moment. A light drizzle came and went in waves, signaling the approaching storm. I was asleep in the single bedroom of my ground-floor apartment I shared with my cat, Hank. My gray friend was curled up on the pillow next to me as I drifted off to dreamland. Whoever was driving me there decided to take a sharp turn, taking me from a peaceful slumber straight into a nightmare that I can never recover from. In the dream, I stood alone on a dark suburban street, lined with rows of lightless houses. Every street lamp was dead, except for one, faintly flickering a few dozen yards away. Beneath it stood a figure, motionless. I felt myself drawn toward his presence, not by curiosity, but by a force beyond my will. As I crept closer, I saw him more clearly. Black hoodie, gray pants, no shoes. I didn't want to get any closer, but I couldn't stop myself. I was dragged towards him, watching helplessly until we were face to face. I stared into his single bloodshot eye and felt a scream building within my chest that just couldn't escape. The other half of his head was just gone, split down the middle in a jagged line. No gore, no mess. Just a hollow void where the rest of his face should have been. Strands of dark hair spilled in front of the single eye as the lone nostril pulsated above unmoving lips. It wasn't objectively terrifying, in a dream at least, to see a man with half of his face missing. There was no blood, no violent scars. But staring at him, at his uncaring and unwavering gaze, the utter vacancy in his stare, I was filled with such an overwhelming sense of dread, so suffocating, that I bolted upright, dripping with sweat. I sat there panting for a few minutes, trying to get my rapidly beating heart under control. I'm prone to bouts of heightened anxiety. I refuse to call them panic attacks. I ran my fingers across the fur of my unbothered friend. Hank was always a comfort whenever my heart started to kick into overdrive. I stayed there, motionless for a while, before finally standing up to use the restroom. As I washed my hands, I looked up towards the dimly lit mirror and nearly jumped out of my skin. There, standing at the bathroom door, was a hooded figure hunched over behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, only to see my towel hanging from its rack. I exhaled, relieved that it was my overactive imagination that had placed the image of my nightmare into the cloth hanging on the door. I retreated back to the safety of my covers, convinced everything was all right. Sleep came easy and I had a restful night. In the morning, I got a call from my younger brother David. We don't speak much, neither of us that great at keeping in contact with each other. so I knew it must be important if he was calling this early in the morning. Mom was dead. They found her lying in her bed. Heart attack. I would have thought her lungs or liver would have gone out first. She was far from the perfect mother, always carrying around a bottle and cigarette whenever she stumbled around the house. She was never the same after Dad died, and seemed to be drowning her memories in drugs and alcohol until they were gone forever. It was when she started taking meth that the childcare services finally came to our rescue. We went to live with our grandmother, who took care of us for the rest of our childhoods. Still, we lived with our mother alone for a few years, and it was enough for me to sever ties with her. Still, she was family, and the least I could do was join my brother in the funeral arrangements.
Even though I was the oldest, Mom had made my brother the successor of the will. Probably because he didn't hate her as much, since he was too young to really remember the pain she brought us. The funeral was short and quiet, my brother's family making up half of the attendees. We both stood there together afterwards, staring at her simple headstone.
"She would always ask me about you, you know,"
he said to me without turning. I stayed silent.
"She still cared about you. Us."
I looked at him. If she cared about us, then what about these burns? I rolled back my right sleeve to reveal the series of cigarette burns, still ingrained in my skin.
"I'm not saying she didn't have her issues,"
David replied, averting his eyes from my glare.
"but she was able to change. She would have been sober 6 months tomorrow."
So what? I shot back. Doesn't change the past. We both stood there in silence for a moment more. As I turned to return to my car, my brother asked me something that stopped me dead in my tracks.
"Do you remember the halfway man?"
A shiver ran through my spine. "No," I began, unable to remember who he was talking about, but still feeling like I knew the name from somewhere.
"It was that story Mom used to tell us at bedtime. That if we weren't good boys, the halfway man would get us."
I shook my head. I try not to remember too much about living with her. Why do you ask? He cast his eyes downward before responding.
"Just something the nurse said she was muttering for a few days before she passed. She kept saying the halfway man was coming for her."
He looked up at me again, seeing the blank expression on my face.
"You really don't remember him. He was just like the boogeyman, but with only half a face."
Then I was really shook.
I was a little disturbed on my ride back to my apartment. I didn't say anything to David about my nightmare. I figured it was a coincidence, my subconscious pulling out the thoughts of a scary story from my childhood just happened to coincide with my mother's passing. Heck, it might have been her last jab at tormenting me before passing over to the other side. Still didn't stop my mind from racing as I tried to bring up bad memories of the past. I could kind of remember our mother sitting us down at night and spouting something about a man who will come to drag us away if we were acting bad. But that's where my recollection ends. That's when I saw him again. In the side mirror of my car, I saw the image of a man in a hoodie for the split second I checked it. The same figure that appeared in my dream. I lost control momentarily as the beating of my heart reached a fever pitch. I swerved left and right before regaining control of the car. I pulled over to the side to try to get my breathing back under control. The car behind me passed by with a honk and a middle finger. After a few minutes, I was able to get back to normal. I checked the mirror once more, just to see the steady stream of passing cars, no strange figures in sight. I don't know why I was getting so spooked by this halfway man bullshit, but I needed to find out more. I decided to poke around on the internet for a bit once I got home. I booted up my PC and closed some work browsers before typing in "halfway man" into the search bar. Hank jumped up onto the desk and started purring, begging for attention. I obliged, idly scratching his back while I peeked around his furry form at the results. All I could find from a normal search was a book by the same title, but it had nothing to do with what I was looking for. I figured it was probably some story she had conjured up just to torment us with. But I decided to try some online forums and see what other people had to say. Nobody on the message boards had useful information. Several users were skeptical, thought I was just trying to drum up my own internet mystery. Some went even so far as to push me to take my post down. It was a couple days before I got a proper lead. The weather had gone from bad to worse, the rain pouring hard against the side of my apartment. So far, I hadn't seen the man with half a face since the drive home from the funeral, so I decided to just put it out of my mind. Then I got a random DM with a number that simply said, "Call me." I would have ignored it, but I recognized the username. It was the same user who was on every single one of my posts, telling me to take it down. I decided to call. I was ready for a yelling match, since he was usually pretty aggressive in his comments online. But after one ring, a man's panicked voice came from the other side of the phone.
Are you alone?
Why do you want to know?
Make sure you're alone, and go somewhere with no reflections. Do you have wireless headphones? Put those in, leave your phone behind, and close your eyes.
He sounded cagey and unwell, my hope in getting something useful out of this phone call waning. I waited a few minutes, rustled around a bit, then replied, "Okay, I'm ready." He stayed silent. I wondered if he was hesitant to answer, or if he knew I had just pretended to follow his instructions. Then he spoke.
The halfway man is real, man, but he only exists when you know he's real. Just take your stupid posts down, forget about him, and you'll be fine.
That wasn't enough to satisfy me. Please, tell me more. I need to understand this before I can just forget it all. He paused again before continuing.
All right, listen, because I am not repeating this. He comes into our world when you think of him, but he can only exist in one place at a time. Then, he crosses over fully once you believe he's real. Before then, you only see him in reflections.
What about dreams? I asked.
A reflection of our mind. Have you seen him?
I explained my dream and the last words of my mother and how she died. I also told him she used to tell my brother and I the story of the halfway man, even though I had forgotten. The man stayed silent throughout my explanation. When I finished, I asked, "What does he do when he comes over?"
He drags you back to where he's from, then waits until he can cross over again.
The hairs on the back of my neck stood tall when he said that. I shifted nervously in my chair, my heart beginning to beat faster. So how does he choose where he comes? My question was cut short by Hank suddenly hissing at the window behind my desk and darting away, knocking one of my monitors down.
What was that?
The man on the phone asked in a panicked voice. Shit. My cat just knocked my monitor over, I unfortunately replied, forgetting I was supposed to be following his instructions from earlier.
I knew I shouldn't have tried to help. You, man. You. You're on your own.
With that, the call ended. I was alone in my apartment. Well, not quite as alone as I had hoped. When I turned to look at what my cat had hissed at, I saw him. The halfway man, that unwelcome figure in a dark hoodie, was standing on the other side of the window. I quickly turned away and closed my eyes before I could see what I knew would only be half of a face. Even though I couldn't see him, I could feel his hateful glare piercing the back of my neck. My breaths became short and quick. I needed to sit down, but I was too frightened to open my eyes. I kept repeating to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." After a few minutes, I felt something brush against my leg. It was Hank, and I was never more grateful for my cat. Then I was in that moment. I tentatively opened my eyes and glanced at the window. Nothing. I breathed a sigh of relief and tried to pretend like everything was okay. I spent the rest of my evening trying to push the thoughts of the halfway man out of my mind. But how could I? In the door of the microwave, the blank monitor screen, even in the reflection of the kitchen faucet, I could just barely see him, his still form, the stringy hair, that lone eyeball staring straight through me. I grabbed some sleeping pills and headed to bed. If I couldn't put him out of my mind, hopefully these drugs would. I washed them down with a bottle of water and slipped under the covers. Hank curled up next to me, and I let the soft and fuzzy comfort calm my racing heart. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke in the dead of night. Thunder rumbled outside as a loud banging echoed from my window. I reached out instinctively for Hank, but he was gone. My stomach sank. I got up and slowly peeked through the blinds, bracing myself for the worst. It was just the sunshade. The wind had loosened it during the storm, and it clattered back and forth against the window. I let out a shaky breath and grabbed my jacket. There was no way I could sleep with all that racket. Out in the storm, soaked and miserable, I worked to coil the shade while the wind and rain continued to beat down on me. I almost would have preferred the halfway man. I glanced in through my bedroom window and froze. Inside the room, reflected in the window just inside my closet, was the hooded man I was trying to forget. I tried to shrug it off, tell myself that it was just one of my hoodies hanging inside. But something was off. This time he wasn't just staring. My heart began to beat faster as I realized why his hateful glare was no longer the only thing that frightened me. He was moving. His pale hand gripped the edge of the door as he slowly pulled it shut from the inside, watching me the whole time. He was in my room. He was in my room and trying to hide in my closet. I thought about running right there. If he was in my house right now, he was definitely going to kill me. But I remembered what that psycho on the phone had said. He's only real if you think he's real. If I ran right now, I'd be admitting it. Admitting that the halfway man was really inside my house. That he was real. If I went back inside, calm, normal, acting like he wasn't real, then maybe he wouldn't be. I had only seen him in the window. He could still just be a reflection. I went back inside and started to write. I told you I'm writing to warn you, but really I'm trying to save myself. You all would have been fine never knowing about the halfway man. But you see, he can't be in more than one place at a time. So every time you think you see someone in the corner of your eye, every shadow that moves wrong, every reflection that makes you take a second look, I need you to believe. Believe in the halfway man. Because if enough of you believe, maybe he'll come for you instead. Maybe that'll pull him away from me long enough to learn how to forget. That's what I'm telling myself right now as I sit here typing. I pretend I can't hear the closet door shift slightly, the quiet footsteps creeping closer. I pretend that I can't feel his breath upon my neck or his lone eye burning into me from just beyond my view. I pretend I can't feel his cold hand tightening around my shoulder. I pretend he's not real. I have to.
And so, the tale of the halfway man fades into the shadows. But will you ever truly forget him? Thanks for joining us on this terrifying journey at Morbid Mystique. If this story sent chills down your spine, give it a thumbs up, share it with your bravest friends, and drop a comment. Have you ever felt a presence just out of sight? Subscribe and ring the bell for more eerie tales that lurk in the dark. Until next time, keep one eye on the reflections and stay mystique.